Well, New Democrat MP Charlie Angus is also in the UK for the inaugural hearing of the International Grand Committee on Disinformation. We've reached him in London. Charlie Angus, thanks for joining us. Good to speak with you again.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
First of all, what's the purpose of this International Committee of Lawmakers? What was the point of having this gathering?
Well, I've been a member of parliament for 15 years, and I've never been involved in an investigation that had so many international implications and difficulties for parliamentarians to get testimony as dealing with the Facebook scandal that led with this Cambridge Analytica breach. Early on in our investigation, we began to realize that there was testimony the British Parliament had, and there was testimony that we could obtain that they couldn't get. So we began actually to work together in sort of a loose, coordinating manner with the UK committee. And both of us were growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of straight answers we were getting from Facebook and the unwillingness of Mark Zuckerberg to appear. So we began to talk about a joint committee, and that drew the interest of lawmakers from around the world, from Ireland, France, Belgium, Latvia, South America, Singapore, who also are really deeply concerned about the growing power of Facebook and their seeming contempt for the issues of domestic law, particularly when it applies to misinformation and the ability of that platform to actually upend the democratic processes of many countries.
Okay, you had hoped to question the Facebook CEO. You mentioned that, Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't show up. Instead, we saw the gentleman we've been seeing in some of our footage here, Mr. Allen, a vice president for Europe. Why was that a problem for you that Mr. Zuckerberg took a pass on this special committee meeting?
Well, I think Mark Zuckerberg's decision to blow off the representatives of countries that represent over 400 million people is the heart of the problem. That time and time again, Facebook gets exposed, gets called out for serious breaches in basic corporate ethics in terms of their obligation to protect users' data, but also to make sure that their platform is an open and fair forum. We saw in Myanmar a horrific genocide carried out, and international voices begging Facebook to do something in the face of the killings, and sort of a general shrug, disinterest. And then when the heat got on, they'd say, oh, we'll do better next time. We see this with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where the misuse of Facebook data because of their laziness to protect data may have upended the Brexit vote. So we can get into all the technical details, but the larger issue is the corporate governance structure of a company that believes it's above domestic law, and that when you have a CEO who seems to be uninterested in being accountable and uninterested in the fact that his company is affecting our democracies around the world, his no-show speaks volumes. And I think it was a serious, serious mistake for Mr. Zuckerberg and Facebook to make today.
Okay. Well, Mark Zuckerberg, he has appeared at other committees, and his vice president, Mr. Allen, made that point today and said that, look, Mark Zuckerberg is directing the company's response to these concerns about privacy and disinformation. So, what would you have asked Mark Zuckerberg if he had been there in the room that you couldn't ask the vice president?
Well, we couldn't get, we got a lot of nice assurances from the vice president that they're sorry, it's a learning experience, they're on a journey, blah, 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 blah. The question to Mark Zuckerberg is time and time again, Facebook has been called out, Facebook has been held accountable, and Facebook just carries on. Does he believe that he is above domestic law and international law? Because what was presented today from our committee, I think, is a growing consensus that the time of allowing a platform this massively powerful, this massively profitable, that is now controlling our news feeds, our conversations, and now even our elections, to allow them to just carry on without feeling that they're accountable to us as legislators to ensure that our processes of democracy that, Westminster has been around for 1,000 years. I think Mr. Zuckerberg's got to explain why he thinks he's above the laws that we have put in place to protect citizens.
Okay, how satisfied are you that Facebook is responding to criticism that its platform has been used, by Russian agents to spread disinformation, or by others who've misused Facebook data? You got some kind of assurances that we'll do better today from Mr. Allen, but you don't sound satisfied.
Well, I mean, they became aware of the 87 million person breach from the Alexander Kogan app that led to Cambridge Analytica being able to uh, upend the Brexit vote. They became aware of that in 2015. They didn't tell Canadians till April 2018 when we were already beginning to investigate. So that is a serious breach. Um, we just found out that their response to these serious allegations of corporate mismanagement was to hire a PR firm to try and insinuate through fake news that George Soros, the international billionaire, was somehow behind it. And Soros has been attacked relentlessly by right-wing anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists. So to have Facebook's response to serious allegations, to respond with a PR misinformation campaign is really disturbing. It shows that you have a corporate entity that believes it can get away with the kind of stuff that the trolls are doing. And this is a powerful corporation with unprecedented economic earnings. They have to be accountable just like other corporations need to be accountable.
Mr. Allen did acknowledge that Facebook has damaged public trust. But what do you think has to happen next? Can Facebook be left to police itself?
The days of Facebook policing itself, I think that discussion is done with. We have really incredibly careful and professional experts who've been looking at this, like Elizabeth Denham, the UK Information Commissioner, who's levied an unprecedented fine against Facebook. She's still frustrated by their responses. The parliamentarians are frustrated. At this point, given the fact that we have no place else to carry on these public conversations because Facebook has bought up WhatsApp, which there was lots of concerns about how that's being played out, Instagram, they have no competition. Are they basically the social media utility that we have to moderate like a public utility? Do we have to start using antitrust mechanisms to break up some of their power so that they can't continue this incredible market dominance where we can't even go anywhere else because Facebook now even controls our news cycles by the algorithms that they've set up? We're dealing with a beast of unprecedented proportions.
All right, let's finish on this. You and the other parliamentarians gathered in London did sign a ceremonial declaration on internet guidelines. It's not binding on the companies, but calls on them to fight disinformation, talks about regulation and legal liability to act against misleading and harmful content on their platforms. What's the purpose of that if it's not binding?
Well, I think what we saw today is representatives from 10 major nations come together and sign a statement of principles that we will bring back to our respective legislatures and parliaments. And we're starting to talk about legislating the internet, something that was considered an anathema 10 years ago. I was certainly against regulating the internet 10 years ago. We wanted to see how this great new creation was developing while the young Mark Zuckerbergs were, trying new things and new apps. To have what happened today in Westminster is unprecedented. It shows that the international community realizes that Facebook is larger than a single domestic jurisdiction. We are going to need international tools and mechanisms. So it was a symbolic gesture, but I do believe that the days of the Wild West of Facebook are numbered, and it will start, whether it's in Europe or in Ireland or in Canada, that we will start to see accountability mechanisms be forced on Facebook if they're not willing to come to the table and say, yeah, we've made serious mistakes. How do we start to operate as good corporate citizens?
All right. Charlie Angus, Canadian New Democrat MP and member of the International Grand Committee on Disinformation, which met today in London, England. Appreciate your time. Good to talk to you, and we'll see you when you get back home.
Thank you so much.